Hey everyone. You know, I would come on as you know, I would come on here sometimes and do what is known as a cartoon flashback. And recently, over this past year, I've done something called the cartoon movie flashback. And I'm still doing those. But once again, I'm going to expand and we're going to be going into what I call the cartoon, not the cartoon flashback, but something that's a little bit different, something similar. It's called the Disney Afternoon Show, the Disney Afternoon Episode Flashback. That's right, TDA Episode Flashback of the Disney Afternoon Episode Flashback. Now, sometimes this will be done, as you see here, on camera, whether it's by the Kindle, the iPod, or my camcorder, and sometimes it might be done through audio. It all depends on how much, not how much, but yeah, it does depend on how much I can get a chance to do it, and it depends on what episodes come to mind. Now, there are several episodes that I want to talk about right off the bat. But one that really got me was I was reading something yesterday. It was at the unofficial Kit Cloudkicker webpage, and it was a rant, basically a rant review section of it. And the person had a list of, not all, but a variety of Disney afternoon shows. And they would review every single episode. They're still doing that even today. It's true. And sometimes they would go back, as of recently, like a few weeks ago, and revise what they had done. So looking at that, I thought to myself, you know what? I need to give my thoughts on episodes as well. I thought to myself, this sounds like a good idea, so maybe I should give my own thoughts. That is why the Disney Afternoon, that is why the Disney Afternoon episode flashback is here. And the first one we're going to look at is actually the finale. It's actually the finale to one of Disney's longest running TDA shows there is. In fact, it was on the air even before Disney Afternoon was considered, and that is the Gummi Bears. Now, the Gummi Bears had debuted back in 1985 on NBC, and remained there until at least 1988-89 when they were moved to ABC. And then after that, they went into syndication, and thus the following year, when the Disney Afternoon came around, they went from ABC and syndication to being part of the Disney Afternoon block. Now, to commemorate the fact that this was to commemorate the Disney Afternoon's debut 25 years ago, yeah, it's hard to believe it's been that long. Disney decided to work with the syndicated stations that were airing the Disney Afternoon and showcase a day-long marathon. I think it was on Labor Day, where all kids were out of school. A day-long marathon of all the best Disney Afternoon miniseries that they had, if not the more recent ones. For example, DuckTales, the most recent one they had was Super DuckTales, the debut of Gizmo Duck. The other ones that they had were, of course, rounding it out towards the evening, was the Rescue Rangers to the Rescue movie pilot. Capping it off, or closing it out, was the Tailspin Plunder and Lightning movie pilot, uncut, that is. And then to start it off, you of course had Gummi Bears. You had Gummi Bears started out. And Gummi Bears started it out, I believe, if I remember correctly, around noon Pacific time noon or 1 o'clock. I think it was noon Pacific. Yeah, it was noon Pacific on KBHK where I lived, or now known as KBCW. And I think if you were watching Gummy Bears for a long time, you were kind of probably surprised that, wait a minute, Gummy Bears is starting out with a miniseries? What's this? You know, and what they started out with was not just the first and only miniseries, but it was also the finale. The finale known as King Igthorn. Now, the person that did the rant review on this pretty much said that, with the exception of a few animation details and maybe a few situations here and there, the King Igthorn, both parts, was indeed one of the best, if not the best episodes Disney Afternoon, if not Gummy Bears, had ever done. And basically it was a great way to close out the show. Now, of course, King Igthorn was not... Now, of course, King Igthorn, and because I know people are going to point this out, and that was a kid in the background. But anyway, like I was saying, now I know some people might point out and argue with me and say, well, Brian, technically, King Igthorn was the series finale, but it wasn't the last episode. That is true, it wasn't. But if you look if you look into more detail and research, you'll find out that King Igthorn, if you will, was an episode that was indeed the series finale, but because of production-wise, it was indeed not the last episode, even though it is the last episode, but it wasn't. Kind of confusing, right? But anyway, the person basically that did the review on this said that the King Igthorn miniseries definitely was a great way for the show to go out. It was definitely a good send-off for the Gummy Bears show. Now, the one thing I know some people have their thoughts about it, and I don't blame them if you have your mixed feelings about this finale, but to me, I looked at King Igthorn as being good as well. As a matter of fact, the reason the animation in part 1 was a little different, and maybe kind of caught people off guard, even though it was done by Walt Disney Animation Oz, I guess that's what they were called. The reason because of that is, I believe, if you take a look at the animation style, and then you compare it to certain animated features back in the late 60s and 70s and even early 80s, you kind of see a very similar trend. Mostly if you take a look at Sword in the Stone. You kind of see a similar, if not identical, animation style to the first part of this King Igthorn miniseries. But it's true. Very similar, so you can kind of tell that the animators took inspiration maybe from Sword in the Stone. Now, there were a few things that people will nitpick, like this person picked at, and they might have a point. At the beginning, we're pretty much told right off the bat that Igthorn's going to be triumphant here. That he's basically going to finally gain victory. He's going to achieve his dream, his goal, if you will. Now, some people have said that it would have been better if that part was weighted on as a flashback to maybe the middle part of the episode. And that might be true. But this was Disney at the time, and I think basically they wanted to kind of give the indication that yes, this was indeed going to go down, and that you need... But here was the thing. They wanted you to... Here's how Disney would put it. Disney basically, I think, made it to where they made you want to think that, even though you knew it was going to happen, but they wanted to try to throw you off. That's how I look at it. But anyway, the finale to me, I thought, was done really well, in my opinion. It was done really well because of the fact that it did, as some people pointed out, and this one person did, it did connect in continuity. There are many references, if not throwbacks, to previous episodes throughout the past, I think, 5 seasons up to that point. I mean, the one scene where basically, when Grammy tries to trick Igthorn into thinking she gave him the recipe, Igthorn, remembering what had happened before, decides, no, I'm not going to do that, and no, I'm not going to test it on Toadwort. No, I'm going to test it on one of your own, and basically his theory, his suspicion proves right. Right, and he finally does get what he wants. Now, I think if you're a fan of animation or live action, and especially of these kind of shows based in the future or Middle Ages or whatever, you have to expect that if a series is going to come to an end, that they're going to do things that pretty much have been hinted at and built upon for a long time. And that's exactly what this was. This was hinted at and built upon for a long time. Now, the first part basically was like telling you right off the bat with everything that was going on that this was indeed the finale. Throughout the series, we had seen the gummy bears basically discover all these ancient glens that have been basically left to rot, left to ruin. So you pretty much had an indication that this was going to happen to the glen itself, that eventually Gummy Glen itself was going to become a ruin. And that's what happened. Pretty much Igthorn sets loose this termite, this super termite called the Big Tooth, on Gummy Glen, and it basically destroys the Glen. Now, the person that did the review, the rant, it indicated that this has happened before, and it has, but not to this extent, and they even point that out. But this isn't just, we can rebuild what was destroyed. No. Basically, Gummy Glen became just like some of those other glens that the gummies had discovered throughout the series run. It become basically ruined, done, history. So, yeah. Basically, the Glen became an ancient ruin. So, long story short, part 1 does end with Igthorn getting everything that he's wanted. Getting the recipe for gummy berry juice. Finally getting even with the gummies, even going as far as destroy Gummy Glen. And finally conquering Dunwin. So, that's basically how part 1 ends. It really does. Now, the one thing about part 1 is it does show that, well, I'll get to this in a little bit. But as we get into part 2, the part 2 does act a little better as a finale, as a true finale for the series. Because basically you see Igthorn finally, gloating over the fact that he's won, trying to make, Gregor look like a tyrant and da-da-da. I mean, heck, he even almost tries to kill Gregor because Gregor, later on in the episode, points out that the people will never accept him as king as long as he's around. Which is true, technically, but not true because even if he was to kill Igthorn, the crown goes to Kala. Get my drift? But long story short, the episode does set up Igthorn as being basically a guy that's finally got what he wanted. And let's just be honest. You know, if it does remind you maybe similar to how Scar acted when he finally got to become king of Pride Rock, in a sense, that's exactly in a similar way how Igthorn was. That he finally got what he wanted. He's basically a spoiled brat that finally got what he wanted. He's now king. He can do whatever he wants. Da 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 da. Now, one blaring thing that several people, including the one that did the rant review of this, pointed out was the fact that even though there were several pieces of evidence surrounding that Igthorn had right in Gregor's face, that Gregor still did not want to believe that gummy bears existed. Even when Igthorn would point out all the obvious times that Gregor would always seem to be a step ahead of him, or always seem to be able to beat him, it's because of the bears. Now, of course, the person that did the review and rant over at the Kid Cloud Cooker's website basically said, no, basically put it in their own way during the review. It's like, no, Gregor, Igthorn is not crazy. Your daughter just won't talk. And I know some people that have probably read that review. It probably pointed out that it would have been better from a story standpoint and even I will say it right now, some may have agreed that it would have been more of a, even though it would be forcing her to do it, it'd be more sensible for Igthorn to threaten to have the ogres basically throw her father out the window and out the tower or wherever they were, to where he'd land and fall to his doom unless she admitted the truth. And thus that would make a little sense, because then she would have no choice but to say, yes, it is true. And true, it might cause a little bit of tension, but the way they've always portrayed Gregor, it's like he's very understanding. It's like he'd be the kind of character that's like, I understand. I know why you did it. I mean, after she would probably explain to him, he'd be like, I understand. He'd be the kind of character who'd be like, I understand. I know. He'd be like, don't worry, I understand. I'm not upset at you. I understand why you did it. And that would make sense. That would actually work. But they didn't do that. Even despite the evidence that was clearly in front of him thanks to Igthorn. I mean, even the book electrifying him when he tried to open it to prove to Gregor that the gummies exist, Gregor still didn't want to believe it. But here's what caught me, though. Here's what caught me. When the big climax happened, and of course you had the Barbics become involved because Gummi went to them for help. And even they finally realized that no matter how much they disdain humans, that the problems that the humans will face are going to be their problems as well down the line if they don't help and do something. Now, you can kind of tell that this... Now, here's where the continuity error comes in. You can kind of tell that this episode is supposed to take place as the finale. Because, yes, the Barbics, I do believe, know about Calvin, but not extensively. And this acts like it's a finale, in a sense. But then again, it's all about continuity. It's all about continuity. But like I said, getting back to the episode, again, it definitely does a good job of showing Igthorn basically acting like a spoiled brat that's finally got his way and everything, and doing as well as trying to at least show him as being competent. In other words, showing him as being smarter than he looks, and even going as far as to say, hey, Gregor, look, this book is a gummy bear book, and it just electrified me, just electrocuted me. What proof do you need? Oh, look, there's ships with gummy bear logos on there. What proof do you need? And even then, he doesn't want to admit. And even then, the people that have reviewed this episode already admit that Gregor would not admit it. But I think he did start to kind of accept that maybe there was that possibility. Because when you think about it, when you get to the finale, the climax of this episode, it's almost like, he basically, you would think with everything that's going on, you would think he wouldn't notice what's happening. He wouldn't notice the bears right there. But yet, there they are. At least a few of them. So you think he would know that, he would understand that. But still, there's no acknowledgement of it. Even though in plain sight. But I think, this is my opinion, I think he did see them, but it's not acknowledged. It's like maybe it's hinted at that he did see them, because he basically tells Igthorn that the tide is turning against him. So it makes you think that, okay, he does know. It's kind of hinted that he does see and now realizes maybe it is true. But it's true, and maybe the reason nobody says anything is because of people like Igthorn. But but it's not acknowledged. It's not indicated. So, take that as you will. But overall, in the end, Igthorn is defeated. Gregor gets his crown.